children tell me that they will not have a conversation with the parent if the parent has a phone in their hand. They say to me, I'm not going to start a hard conversation and then have my mom's phone beep, buzz, or ring, and then she's gone, and I'm not going to start it over.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, today on the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, I want to look at something funny that I found. It's called TV moms. There's kind of a new parent that's coming from social media, really in a vengeance. They're the self-described TV moms. They don't limit their TV time, but they do keep personal electronics, things like phones and iPads, either away from their children or incredibly limited. This is something that Fortizia Latifa wrote about at Yahoo News, and she notes that the American Academy of Pediatrics really does recommend screen time and media use be very limited across all forms of media, including TV. For kids younger than 2 years old, they don't want them to watch any media. And those that are 2 to 5 years old, they say that kids that age group could watch maybe 1 hour a day. So she ended up kind of posting on this on her social media, and she got hit back with TV moms who really insist that there is a meaningful difference between watching television and scrolling through YouTube shorts and things like that on an iPad. So studies have shown that even having a TV on in the background really is negatively correlated with different things like language acquisition and cognitive development, especially in kids under 5. But it's also been shown to distract kids from just playing in general. Additional research has also found that the quality of programming and the context of the programming where the kid will interact with it in, especially watching TV with parents or siblings, that can actually make a meaningful difference for kids as they're engaging with television. One thing, though, is for certain, screens of all kinds seem to be winning the day right now. There's a 2020 survey that I found that shows that 4 out of 10 parents say that television is either always on or on most of the time in their homes. And there's a 2025 survey that found that 40% of 2-year-olds have their own tablet. And that number increases to 60% when they turn age 4. Now, Dr. Kathy, I want to kind of dive into this and get some of your perspectives here. But before we do that, I want to ask you, does this make sense as you're seeing in the world? Is there a difference in TV use and iPad use as some of these TV moms are kind of purporting inside of social media? Or is all media created equal?
Wow. I don't think it's equal. I think it's different. And I would say I believe that partly because of this research. I think moms and people like us need to trust researchers who are really digging into things like this. I think for me, certainly the TV is different. I think for kids as well, you sit them down in front of it. I think they're more passive with TV unless they're watching TV on a device that's in their hands. But if they're watching TV that's, on a table or on a wall and they don't have control over it, they're more passive. I think it's different. And this is really concerning to me. I'm glad we're talking about this.
Yeah, Dr. Kathy, I have thought about this a lot because I do think that television use ends up being a little bit of a communal engagement. At least in our home it does, right? So we'll sit down, and even like this morning, my wife was watching a show with the kids that looked back through the decades that highlighted how McDonald's has changed from the early foundations of McDonald's to today. And they walked through the menu, and she was like, oh, that was really fun. They used to have styrofoam and pancakes that were somewhat real. And now it's just all feels chemically induced or whatever. But in all of that, we've seen that the television ends up being something that we can kind of maybe gather around, share some thoughts around, and have funny conversations around. But iPads and cell phones tend to pull our family into different parts or corners of the room. And so I want to ask you, when we look at the difference, does it make a difference for our kids, or do they see all screens used the same?
I don't think they see all screens the same. I've seen kids whine and complain and throw a fit when mom or dad try to take away an iPad from the kid. I doubt that the same thing happens, although it could certainly turn off the TV. They're not going to be happy. But I think the individual ownership of a device maybe is different for kids. And I love what your wife did this morning with the kids. I think watching any media as a family where you can discuss it and compare it to something in your life and compare it to the show you watched last week or whatever, all of that is really healthy because that's going to build intellectual curiosity. That's going to build engagement, team building, vocabulary, and those kinds of things. Where watching, a screen without any interaction from someone allows the kids to make their own thoughts, create their own ideas, decide on their own whether or not that was good, bad, or ugly. And that's not good. Parents need to be teaching discernment because these are little kids who don't know right from wrong yet. And we're not able to do that if we're not even aware of what they're watching.
Yeah, that's so true, Dr. Kathy. I want to dive in a little bit more into this because we are in a culture of screens. I mean, it's everything from
Mhm.
going to a restaurant and seeing TVs on the wall, but even more than that, it's going to a restaurant and realizing that I could play 3 to 5 different games while I wait for my food to get there. And it can
Yeah.
be a distraction for me or my kids to forget how long it's taking me for my food to get there. But then I get into the car and I turn on the car, and all of a sudden now there's a screen right there, and it's really begging for my attention. It wants me to touch it and redo my route and put in new music and maybe even get a text message. It just feels like all the time screens are on. And then when I get home, it's really natural for us to also have, a TV on. I think, especially in this generation of parents, for me especially, it's natural to come into the house and feel like I don't like the silence or the quietness. So I turn a TV on, or I ask Alexa to play me my playlist, or different things like that. And whether it's visual noise or audio noise, we do really probably pursue it pretty strongly.
Yeah.
How does this impact our kids? Knowing that this is kind of the culture that they're raised in, what does it do to us when we don't really allow for quietness to be around us and we do want video or audio noise around us all the time?
Several things on my mind. One would be that it really gives us permission to ignore the people we're living with and the people we say we love. We can go into our own rooms or sit in the same room and we're all on our own device. We don't have to talk to anyone. We don't have to look them in the eye. We don't have to hug them. We don't have to ask about their day. We don't have to guide their intellectual understanding or their heart understanding of what's going on. And I think that's really dangerous. Children tell me that they will not have a conversation with the parent if the parent has a phone in their hand. They say to me, I'm not going to start a hard conversation and then have my mom's phone beep, buzz, or ring, and then she's gone, and I'm not going to start it over. So when they see that we're busy, they feel insignificant, unimportant, unnecessary, maybe even unwanted, which is tragic. What if you had a child who really had a need? And it could be a simple need like, Mom, I don't know the answer to number three. Or it could be a big need about something that happened on the playground that day or at a homeschool co op and they don't think that we're available to them. I think it gives us all a chance to be distracted and to be constantly entertained. Wayne, what would you and I be like if our childhood had always been entertainment, entertainment, you can win any game you play, versus conversations and playing with a brother and a sister and getting out of the house and Red Rover, would Kathy come over? Where a lot of our kids today, sadly, in my opinion, are not having those kinds of experiences.
I want to go into that point a little bit. I want to dive in there because this is the world that our kids are growing up in, and they are really impacted by it. And so for me, I grew up in a different era. You grew up in a totally different era than I did. And so now we're at this place where this is the era that our kids are growing up in. What is it actually doing to them? And I especially want to look a little bit at some of their like identity formation. What are the things that we had growing up that formed us that our kids are missing out on, that we should really take ownership of and defend, that our kids should have those things developed? What does technology or these screens around them all the time take away from them that really we need our kids to have, especially as they're growing?
Wisdom rises when we're quiet. I write about this in my book, Screens and Teens, connecting with our kids in a wireless world. When we're quiet, wisdom rises. We have good ideas, we have clever thoughts, we have more creative intent, or it can be as simple as something to add to the to-do list. But when we're quiet, our mind can be heard. I also think for believers that when we're quiet, the Holy Spirit gets through. I just had a privilege of earlier this week when we're recording this, spending a week with 30 young adults who admitted to me that when they go to bed at night, their brain is on fire and they can't sleep because they're finally having thoughts and they don't have them during the day. Why don't they have them during the day? Well, they don't notice them during the day because they're distracted by any number of things. And so quiet restores the soul. Quiet is when wisdom rises. We get to make independent decisions. We get to handle boredom. We get to, listen to others. I think you and I grew up with conversations. We grew up with visiting with people and serving our neighbor. And we grew up with parents who I think were invested. I think we grew up with creative play, and we grew up with fewer distractions. We did one thing at a time. Or I might have come home from school and watched one of my favorite shows with a bowl of ice cream in my lap, but not with, devices where I was, scouring the internet for the next best idea and excited when I found it.
As Dr. Kathy and I were talking today, it reminded me of a passage that comes out of Deuteronomy chapter 6. I'll begin reading at verse 1. These are the commands and the decrees and the laws of the Lord our God that he's directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you're crossing over the Jordan to possess, so that you and your children and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live, by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy long life. Hear, Israel, and be careful to obey, so that it may go well with you, and you may increase greatly in the land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has promised you. This passage is the beginning of the Shema. It's an instruction for Israel on how they should live life with rhythms. And it goes on in verses 4 and on in chapter 6 to talk about sitting and walking and resting and rising. This formation happened in everyday moments through repetition, through conversation, and really shared life. It didn't happen in constant input like what our kids are having. So in a culture that's always on, we see that screens really collapse rhythms. When TV is always on or a tablet is always within reach, it's natural for our kids to lose natural spaces for boredom and imagination, and even conversation. Identity forms through repeated relational cues. It kind of engages with these big ideas and questions of who notices me, or who responds to me, or who names what matters. TV that's watched together occasionally and intentionally and talked about afterward is really different from personal devices that are really engineered for our endless consumption. But even TV loses its formation value when it becomes constant in the background noise of life. So as parents, I think we should be encouraged to turn screens off and to turn our attention on to our kids. And I think in doing that, that could be a bright light that can shine and cut through some of the darkness that might be surrounding our kids with the constant, incessant engagement with screens. I hope that's an encouragement for you, and I hope that all that we do here at Celebrate Kids is an encouragement for you. I want to encourage you that if you'd like more on this topic, go to our website, celebratekids.com. There's a book that Dr. Kathy has written specifically on this topic called Screens and Teens. You can find the book there and buy it, and we'll ship it to you right today. It's an important resource that I think will encourage you as a parent. And I hope that this podcast, that book, and all that we do here at Celebrate Kids is an encouragement for you. We're so thankful that you joined us today here on the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment, Face in the Dark. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Koch, my name is Wayne Stender. Looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.